Hello everyone and welcome back to more of the Labyrinth of Grisaia. I'm never going to get that right. In the last episode, Heath Oslo took his young prodigy, aka Yuuji, to a secret school that trains terrorists. And we've been going through the school really well because Heath Oslo started to praise our abilities, and well, we like being praised because it makes us happy, and we like being happy, so we kept doing better and better. Now we're at the final exam portion, and we have to fight another person to the death. It is Marin, who was a very nice girl who helped us out when really no one else would. So how is this going to play out? I mean, we have to kill her, so I don't know. I'm worried. Let's continue. No, fate probably wasn't involved in retrospect. I imagine they deliberately paired people off with their most intimate friend in the facility, as a way of forcing us to gain the resolve to sacrifice everything for our objective. In this place, when you had a bad feeling about something, it was usually realized. That was just how it was designed.
肉親ですらその手にかけた君だ。今さら顔見知りの一人ぐらい殺したところでどうということはないだろう?
It was true enough. No use trying to lie to myself now. In the first place, it wasn't exactly uncommon for students to die over the course of their training, not to mention the casualties from spontaneous fights and punishments inflicted by groups of fellow students. Just the previous week, there had been a guy who'd committed suicide after being relentlessly bullied over his poor results. And then there was the new kid who made a habit of wandering the halls at night moaning loudly. I guess he got the attention of our veterans. Someone found him in the bathroom one morning with his face submerged in a toilet. Ugh. In this place, the wall separating life from death was thin and fragile. But even so, killing someone we lived with for months in cold blood was a different story entirely. Even if we didn't have anything in the way of team spirit, murdering a person you've gotten to know is even more difficult than you might even imagine. Therefore, our instructors gave all the graduation candidates a stimulant, telling us it was a drug that would sharpen our kinetic vision and boost our reflexes. The results vary widely. Some people became so agitated they could barely sit still, snapping into pointless rages over things that normally wouldn't bother them, and snarling at the slightest provocation. But others were so busy processing the sudden flood of sensory information that they actually appeared unnaturally calm. I suppose I was in the latter group, and Marin, my opponent, was definitely in the former. In any case, they said I needed to kill her if I wanted to graduate. So that was what I'd have to do. Kill another human being. Wow. As the two of us faced off, I couldn't find anything to say to the person I was about to fight to the death. Maybe it was the same for Marin, or maybe she no longer even cared. Most likely it was the latter. Even if the girl standing in front of me was technically Marin, something else was controlling her mind now. Her eyes darting restlessly back and forth. Probably weren't seeing anything more than an enemy in front of her. Marin breathed in rough, quick gasps, as if to expel the heat gathering inside her body. It was obvious at a glance how agitated she was. There was no referee for this match, no instructor to shout "begin" or "that's enough." It wouldn't end until one of us was dead. Spitting out her red-hot anger in a scream, Marin suddenly threw herself forward. She surged toward me, her limbs outstretched to the limit, cutting through the air. She put her weight on her left leg, twisting the upper half of her body to balance herself. She swung her right leg with all her strength, viciously, not even considering the possibility of a counterattack. I could see all of it, every movement flowing into the next, as if I was watching a slow-motion film. Marin's knees shot out, and in the next moment her leg curved upward, toes stretched towards my face. Not an easy kick to defend, given that quick transition from a straightforward jab to an arcing trajectory, but I'd seen it many times in training. Her precise execution actually made it easier to anticipate. I raised my guard, shielding my face, chin, and neck. Marin's right leg instantly smacked against my crossed arms. Gah! Marin's kick was heavier than I'd expected. Her pivot leg turned sharply in the opposite direction with the force of delivering it. My arm screamed from the impact. In the same instant, she twisted her leg violently to slip around my defense, striking the back of my head with her toes. For a moment, my vision went blurry. Marin showed absolutely no hesitation, even delivering a kick that could easily have left her leg broken and useless. But it wasn't anything worth worrying about. In physical strength, reaction speed, and tactical judgment alike, I was significantly superior to Marin. I just had to take her first attack and land an accurate counter. That was all. Sorry about this, Marin. The kick had left her perched on one awkwardly planted leg. An apology to the young woman had been kind to me, echoed. Right inside my strangely cold mind, I twisted my body and drove my right knee at her before she could even regain her balance. My kneecap slammed into Marin's face. Something gave way. I must have shattered her nasal bones. Stimulated by the impact, I felt a wave of energy surge through every muscle in my body. Marin's body swayed and wobbled like a spinning top, running out of momentum. If she collapsed now, it would be easy enough to finish this. She couldn't be thinking too clearly after taking that sort of a hit to the head. There wasn't much risk of her luring me in and going for the grappling move. And yet... Marin didn't fall. With a fierce scream, she forcibly tied her fading consciousness to reality through sheer force of will. Damn it! Her arm lashed out reflexively, lightly grazing my right temple. It was such a wild lunge that it was hard to imagine how she expected to hit me. Maybe she was moving on pure instinct by now. Just like before, there was no sign that she was even considering defense. I spun easily around to her unguarded right flank and landed another knee strike. The blow landed so deeply I could feel Marin's kidney twitch and curl up inside her, her abdominal muscles contracted sharply. It was obvious she hadn't been remotely prepared to take that hit. A kick like that hurts so badly it feels like someone's jabbed a knife into your internal organs. I'd experienced it myself more than once. The instant that pain registers, the world goes pure white. You instinctively grab your side and fall to your knees. Marin was gasping for breath, her mouth open wide. But it didn't help that her nasal cavity was completely blocked with blood. Instinctively, I stooped over to protect her stomach, chin thrust out defensively as she gulped down oxygen. The girl almost seemed to be asking for a finishing blow. I'll put you out of your misery. With that thought running through my mind, I landed a right hook to Marin's chin. Her head rocked on the axis of her neck like a dummy. The massive brain cells floating inside her skull jolted wildly back and forth. Marin's eyes instantly spun backwards into her sockets. She had to be unconscious, but she still didn't fall. What the hell? Relentlessly, I drove a second punch into her chin, then a third. But even so, Marin wouldn't go down. Her mouth hung open limply. The punches might have dislocated her jaw. Spittle flowed down her chin, her eyes completely unfocused, spun aimlessly around, but Marin still did not fall. God damn it! Somehow she must have been clinging on to one last scrap of willpower, knowing that she'd die if her knees touched the ground. No matter how she reeled and swayed, Marin stayed on her feet. If hitting won't do it, I'll just throw her off balance. That inhuman toughness was starting to frighten me. Resisting the urge to scream, I reached up and shoved heavily against Marin's shoulders, trying to push her to the ground. In that moment, I found myself looking straight into her face. Her battered, swollen, ghastly face, dark with bruises, red with blood. Ah, that face. Woke up something that had been lying latent inside me, and suddenly my body wasn't moving like I wanted it to. That face. I'd seen that face before. It was the face of my mother, the one I'd seen at the very end. Someone had stabbed a rod of ice into the center of my heart. I trembled uncontrollably at the sudden cold inside me. What am I doing? Hitting a woman until she looks like this? How am I any different from him?
どうして殺せ
And as the spectators scream for me to kill, I flashed vividly back to the moment where I struck my father. I couldn't move. My knees shook like branches in the wind. I wanted to fall to the ground and curl up in a ball. Finally, crouching where I stood, I abandoned the fight entirely. It was no good. I was no good. I couldn't kill her. It was kill or be killed, but I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. As Marin's frenzied laughter rang out, the situation reversed completely. My deranged, drugged classmate kicked and punched me countless times, drunk on one-sided violence. And I lay there enduring the pain, so overwhelming I thought my skin would burst from its intensity. This is my punishment. This is what I deserve for hurting a woman. I was used to pain. All I had to do was endure it, and it would end eventually. In the end, I couldn't do anything else. Story of my life. Resigned to my fate, passively accepting the rain of blows, I heard a familiar voice shouting out from somewhere far away.
どうしたユージ今さら何人殺そうが同じことだ立て戦え
Oslo was shrieking from the crowd, ordering me to stand, but not even he could move me now.
なんてこったまったくユージ君ってやつは
Watching Marin beat me to the verge of death, Oslo pinched the corners of his eyes in obvious disappointment. Although I did somehow manage to survive, I was left badly injured and completely immobilized. The staff proceeded to unceremoniously toss me into the school's underground treatment facility. That name might give you the wrong impression. The place was basically a dungeon where they left the severely wounded to rot. Lying flat on the floor, I felt the cold concrete, quickly absorbing the heat from my inflamed skin. It felt wonderful. Even so, it occurred to me that if I let myself fall asleep like this, I'd almost certainly never wake up again. Doesn't sound so bad, does it? If I died down here, Marin would get to graduate. It seemed a little pathetic to be searching for meaning in my defeat, but at the very least, Marin would get out of this insane place. I had to focus on that fact, or my own existence would become so completely pointless, I might just go crazy. I didn't receive any real treatment down there. I was just lying on the ground like a discarded rag when Marin came to visit me, having regained her sanity when the effect of the drugs faded. A few hours must have passed by that point. Waking up to the sensation of a damp, hot towel scrubbing my face, I was surprised to find that my right eye wouldn't open. In fact, I couldn't even lift my face from the ground. My blood had congealed around me, literally gluing my skin and hair to the concrete. Mumbling words of apology, Marin carefully wiped my face with the towel, cleaning off the hardened blood. Sleeping on the bare floor must have severely lowered my body temperature. The hot fabric felt incredibly good. As she tended to my injuries, Marin sniffled quietly and spoke again. It was the last thing I wanted to hear. Those were the same words my mother had left behind in her suicide note. Words of surrender, offering nothing but despair and weakness. But it's not like I had an answer to them, so I responded only with silence. I don't know how Marin interpreted my attitude, I really don't. Whatever the case may be, she returned to that basement room the next day and the next, quietly treating my injuries as if it were her duty.
食べられそう？
I'm not hungry.
少しでも何か食べないと怪我が治らないよ。胃が空っぽのままじゃ薬も飲めないし。
I don't want any medicine either.
どうして？
It's ridiculously bitter.
バカね。薬が苦いのは当たり前でしょ。安心して、毒じゃないわ。ほら、私が飲んでみせるから。ね。
With that, Marin swallowed a mouthful of the liquid medicine she'd bought for me.
何これ、本当に苦い。
Yeah, cough medicine is usually pretty nasty. Or at least medicine, like liquid medicine. Most liquid medicines taste pretty bad. I told you so. Stupid.
本当、ひどい味ね。でも、飲めば炎症が治まって、ちゃんと眠れるようになるから、飲んで。あと、食事も。ほら、口を開けて。
I'll feed myself, thanks.
そう言って、この前も全然食べなかったじゃない。一人じゃ起き上がることもできないくせに。いいから口を開けるのよ。ほら。
How many days have passed since Marin's first visit to the basement? It might have been the first time I talked so much with another person since I arrived at that school. The place was full of people with bitter and traumatic pasts, just like me. So the unspoken rule was to keep your distance. Our private lives and personal stories were off limits. Of course, Marin had absolutely no memories of the past to begin with. That actually made it easier to get by here. It was completely normal to her, and she didn't seem to be bothered by it. After examining my injuries in silence for a few minutes, Marin suddenly asked me a question.
あなたは、どうしてあんな男に拾われたの？
I didn't understand. Why ask about my circumstances now, after all this time? Why now? The question felt so strange that I couldn't find anything to say. What would it change if I told you, Marin? Why does it matter to you? You don't even know the first thing about yourself. Maybe you forgot about the past because it was too painful to remember. Sounds pretty good to me. I'll go with that too. I don't even want to remember. It wasn't as if anything good would come from remembering. Just be opening up old wounds. Talking wasn't going to undo what was already done. My life was never going to change unless I changed it myself.
私ね、近いうちにこの学校を卒業することになったの。
Really? Good for you.
でも、本当に良かったのかな。
Well, even this place had been working as a pawn of Oslo. But no matter what was waiting for us, I figured it had to be better than aimlessly circling around this sewer of a place for the rest of our lives. Don't worry about me. Once you get out of this place, just try to just forget me, okay? And everything else that happened here. This is not the past you want to remember. Whatever they make you do, that should make it a lot easier.
私、戦うのは苦手。人を傷つけないで生きていければ、それが一番いいのにね。
So does everyone else. When you hurt people, you might get hurt. When you kill people, you might get killed. Nobody wants to live in a world where the only options are to take a life or lose your own. But if you want to survive, you can't avert your eyes. The people who run away from reality, they die first. The way I'd broken down after seeing my mother and Marin's bloody face was a good case in point.
じゃあ、また来るから。
With those words, Marin left the basement. But she didn't visit me the next day. She didn't come the day after that either, or even the day after that. At that point, I finally understood. Marin had graduated and left this place behind. Those words hadn't been a casual goodbye. Their real meaning was, if I survive, I'll come see you again. I think it was about 2 weeks or so after Marin left. With my wounds mostly healed, I was officially upgraded from critical to stable condition. That meant I was authorized to leave the basement and admit myself to the medical wing. It was there that I heard the news.
ああ、あの子ならね、もう死んじゃったよ。それなりにいい成績だったから期待はしていたんだけどね。初めての仕事でつまらない失敗をしちゃったんだって。残念なことだよね。っていうかさ、卒業してすぐに死なれちゃうと、うちの教育に問題があったんじゃないかって、いろいろと上から言われてすごく面倒なんだよね。あんたもさ、ここを出て行った後は、しばらくは死なないことだけに気をつけてよ。マジで迷惑だからさ。
Marin was dead. It's not like this sort of thing hasn't happened before. New people were always coming in, only to disappear without warning. She was just one of many. But even so, even if I'd beaten Marin down in that final test and graduated in her place, she wouldn't have had to die like this. I couldn't help being a little bothered by that. It's because you were so nice to me. Maybe that was the real reason Marin was gone. She was just too nice. Every woman who treated me kindly ended up dead. I couldn't let myself rely on anyone ever again. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself of that. Go it alone. By the time I received permission to discharge myself, there was a completely different group of trainees in the lodging facilities. I'd been recuperating for so long that the other survivors from my class had finished their term and graduated. There wasn't a single familiar face left. Normally, I should have jumped right back into training to make up for the month I'd spent recuperating. But the instructors had already started over with the next generation of students, and it's not like they were going to take the time to offer me personalized lessons. So while the others drilled, I was simply assigned self-study under the name of personal training. To be honest, though, it wasn't much of a training regimen. They basically just ignored me and let me do whatever the hell I wanted. I kept a regular running schedule in order to regain my endurance, sometimes getting in a little live firing practice to maintain my eyesight, but I otherwise didn't do much of anything, really. Even when I was just walking around aimlessly, the instructors turned a blind eye. Nobody ever bothered chewing me out anymore. In fact, sometimes they'd even nod vaguely in my direction and say, "Keep at it." Not only did the instructors seem to know me, they treated me with respect and didn't ask me to participate in the training. I spent most of my time wandering the halls for no real apparent reason. So understandably enough, the new guys mostly kept their distance, shooting me wary looks that read, "Who the hell is this guy supposed to be? Who's this big shot?" Finally, 2 months after my first attempt, I was given another chance at graduation. For my second exam, I was tasked with carrying out an actual assassination in the field. For all intents and purposes, it was a preemptive graduation and immediate deployment. The target was one of 3 judges who would be presiding over an international trial involving Heath Oslo's suspected crimes in various foreign countries. To put it simply, I was there to cover Oslo's ass by killing a man who couldn't be swayed by money. You know what? I'm going to leave it here. So we're going to see this whole assassination attempt unfold in the next episode. Take it easy, everybody.